Space up in the front. My name's Ben Mcalister, and I'm one of the total quality managers at the Procter & Gamble Company, and it is my privilege to introduce this session's speaker. In chatting with him briefly about the introduction, he made two comments. One was that people don't pay attention to the introduction anyhow, but I persisted that indeed I was going to introduce him, so he offered me one comment to add to comments I have in mind. The comment that he offered me was that he is among the very highest of performers from the low-price field, and perhaps he'll elaborate on that. My comments are to amplify why I say it's my privilege to introduce this afternoon's speaker. Rarely does a person accomplish so much in a single lifetime as our speaker has already accomplished. If you've had a chance to read his bio, you will note that he has been a senior executive at a major corporation. You will note that he has been the dean of a major engineering school. You will note that he has been a senior officer in the federal government. And you may, if you haven't become overwhelmed, you may note that he was a director for an extended period of time for something that sounds intriguing, which is MIT's Center for Advanced Engineering Study. It was in that role, as I understand the background, that Dr. Tribus was the moderator for a public television show in Boston. And a guest one day, a bit more than a decade ago, was one Dr. Deming. And following the taping of that program, and ever since, Dr. Tribus has been trying to help people throughout the world implement the ideas of Dr. Deming. The bio also notes that Myron retired 4 years ago. The only thing you could detect in his retirement was that he switched coast and he moved from Boston to California, the Bay Area. And on arriving in Boston, he commenced two post-retirement careers. One was a startup firm on an important new energy innovation, and the other was helping people throughout the United States establish quality councils. One final comment, and then no further ado, is among the many companies that Dr. Tribus has introduced to the teachings of Dr. Deming, you can include the Procter & Gamble Company. And a bit less than 10 years ago, Dr. Tribus caused the Procter & Gamble Company to start its journey in trying to implement the teachings of Dr. Deming. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you our speaker, Dr. Myron Tribus.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. What I think you've succeeded in doing is showing people that I can't hold a job. But what I want to talk to you about today is an approach that we've developed over the last 8 years to introduce quality management concepts to a community. Now, this approach combines the disciplines of community development and quality management. The challenge is to change the culture of an entire community. Unlike the situation in industry, we are not working with a well-defined structure which has a well-defined leader. It's necessary to proceed quite differently than in industry, where the pyramid of power, to use Duran's phrase, is well established. In an industrial setting, a common barrier is the mindset of the CEO. I am constantly asked, will you come to my company and help us explain to the CEO what quality management is all about? And when I receive such a request, I routinely turn it down. I tell people, I have a friend who does things like that. You might want to call on him. His name is Don Quixote. In a community, this kind of problem does not arise because no one plays the role of a CEO. It's useless to search for one person who needs to be convinced. In a community, the power is diffused. The leadership role moves from one person to another as the topics change. By definition, a community is a political arena. And I don't use the word politics in a pejorative sense. A community is held together by certain common interests, and at the same time it is pulled in different directions by conflicting interests. And the process by which compromises are made is called politics. Politics is the art of compromise, and I have no sympathy whatsoever for people who say they believe in democracy but not compromise. When you try to introduce TQM into a community, you will have an impact on the power structure of the community. And therefore, if you are one of the change agents, you must be ever sensitive to the political ramifications of what you do and what you're undertaking. When you introduce total quality management, you can, in fact, provide a glue which holds the community together and helps people to cooperate for the common good. TQM can, in fact, be a unifying force in a political arena, and I want to talk to you about how to make that happen. Now, the process I'm talking about, which took us about 8 years to develop and understand, began as a joint effort of two not-for-profit enterprises. One is called the American Quality and Productivity Institute. It's a group that we started out of MIT shortly after we met Dr. Deming. And it was intended as a means of starting something in the United States to play the role that the JUSE plays in Japan. But we discovered that starting such an enterprise was extremely difficult. First of all, the people who understood this sort of thing 10 years ago were scarce and very, very busy. Secondly, if you try to start a new enterprise like this in the United States, you have to fight every existing professional society. ASQC thinks it's doing it. It wasn't. The Statistical Society thinks it's doing it. Everybody thinks he's doing it without knowing what it is, but you certainly threaten the job security of the executive directors of the existing societies, and they don't help you at all. While we were mulling over what to do, people began to come to my office at MIT saying, we hear you know something about quality, we'd like to start something to support Deming's works. Also, the group called GOAL, Growth Opportunity Alliance for Lawrence, was starting in Massachusetts, and we had participated in their formation. So it began to occur to us that these community groups were going to start anyway. We ought to get in and at least give them some direction. And so we formed the American Quality and Productivity Institute. Meanwhile, Carol Hannon, now Carol Schwinn, started a group in Jackson, Michigan, to do something, first of all, about the situation in Jackson where there was a great recession due to the drop in automobile sales, and Jackson was largely based, its economy was based on supplying to the automobile industry, to start teaching people what is SPC and how to do better management. And that activity grew and grew until suddenly, not so suddenly, but over several years, the folks at Jackson were busy teaching these ideas to community colleges all across the United States. So here were two groups. One group trying to start a community interest in quality without a clear idea of exactly how to do it, but there were people out there wanting to start and we would help them. And another group teaching people, training trainers in different locations in different states. And of course, we started crossing paths. And it became very clear that we had a mutual problem. On the one hand, you go into a community and you tell people they got to learn about quality, but then they don't know how to learn because there's nobody around to do the teaching. Or if you're at a junior college, you've got these handy-dandy courses on SPC, but nobody is showing up because there's not a community interest. And so we decided we'd get together, and we had a meeting, and it was just a matter of luck that we ended up in Kingsport, Tennessee, because Bud Lunsford, who was one of the founding people of the American Quality and Productivity Institute, was there. Eastman Kodak was there. And Bud was already involved in making improvements in Eastman Kodak. And we decided to choose Kingsport as a town where we would deliberately try to change the culture. And we set out a plan to do it, and it took us about a year to get everything in order before the kickoff, the first presentation. And that work went very, very well. And we have since that time tried to apply the same ideas in other communities. Now, instead of going back through history, I'm going to talk to you about how to do it right. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the things that go wrong, although we have a long list. You will find in your books a paper that we have written which is much longer than the material I'm going to talk about today. There are many things in that paper that I don't include in the talk today. We've worked with about 30 communities thus far. Not all of our work has been successful. We find that since these are volunteer activities, the people don't always want to do what we tell them to do. Since they're volunteers, they're not on our payroll, they can do as they please, and they do. And quite often we'll find a community which just does some of the things we say. I am personally becoming more forceful in dealing with communities. I travel across the country, and I agree to go just for expenses, not get paid for it. The pay for me is in seeing what actually happens, but I'm very choosy. If people don't do what we say, then I can't come. The most important lesson I want to draw to your attention, first of all, what is the purpose of our Community Quality Council? Community Quality Coalition. We took the American Quality and Productivity Institute and the Transformation of American Industry project at Michigan and formed this joint venture, CQC, the Community Quality Coalition. And our purpose is to promote the introduction of quality management principles in every community in the United States, and to make quality management principles a way of life for all aspects of the community. And we're interested in small business, big business, city government, schools, and hospitals, and all sorts of enterprises in the city. And we meet this objective by assisting communities to develop their own resources for education and training. We develop a community-wide organization to promote awareness, create their own infrastructure to continue the activities after we leave. If we succeed, the community will start a process of improving the quality of its life and enlarging its influence. As I say, we've worked with about 30 communities, and not all of them have been successful, but what we have learned, one important lesson, is this one. When you introduce quality management principles, you must use them yourself. You must practice what you preach. We have found that when we do this, it makes a difference. And we hope that the paper that you have will exemplifies that. Now, we have developed a flowchart to introduce total quality management into a community. We use flowcharts to instruct people on what they should and should not do, and you'll find this flowchart in your diagram if what comes up on the screen is not sufficiently visible. Across the top, we put the players who get into the act, and going down, more or less, time runs down the chart. We put the activities, and if a box shows up underneath a player, that's the person who's supposed to do it. or if it's across several people, why then that's the group that does it. A box that is rounded on the ends is a meeting. A box that has a shadow on it means there's another chart somewhere that gives greater detail. And running down the extreme right are the lists of things to worry about. I was influenced by a talk I heard this morning in which it was pointed out that this chart across the top really is, and its interaction with the process is what is called a social system, and the boxes are a technical system. The boxes describe the work, and the chart, taken as a whole, shows the social system and the technical system and their interaction. We begin by picking a city. Well, sometimes the city picks us. People call up and say, we've heard that you help. We heard through the grapevine that you help. Or we're already started and we learned about you, will you help us? And we have one rule. We don't even think of starting unless there's one person there who understands and wants to work. We warn everybody away from the person who doesn't understand but wants to work. The little circle means that we have some assistance. TEC is the Technology Exchange Center. There are different groups around the country that cooperate with us. So we pick a city, and then we meet with a person that I'll call an animator to discuss what's the interest in your community and how would you get started. We help that person to organize a local team, and in a moment I'll show you the flowchart for how you go about organizing a local team. You start with a set of goals and improve on them. It is extremely important that your group have goals which appeal to people to come and work with you. Many of the communities where we do not have much success, they're still going, are communities that say, we are setting up this organization to learn more about quality, and we will have speakers, and we will have meetings, and we will have discussions. And what they're doing is appealing to people who are already committed, and they're not reaching out to help anybody. But we say you want to affect everything in your community, and then you have to have a plan to do that. And if you say to people, we are organizing this group to make our community a special place of high quality, so as to protect our jobs, to make the situation more competitive, to improve our city government so that we get more service for our tax money, and by introducing quality management techniques into the police and the schools, we can reduce juvenile delinquency. That's what we're all about. Then people will come and participate and learn. But they don't want to come to a meeting which is just where the choir is singing to itself and which is mostly looking inward. So we spend a lot of time with helping people to understand that. And then we recommend that they form a quality team, get acquainted, and decide who's going to do what. And here we say it's absolutely essential that the members of that organizing team know what it's all about. There's a tendency to want to invite people because they are politically powerful, and that's a mistake. You get a loose cannon on the deck. You've got to have people, and it takes about 5. In a city like this, you give me 5 people on the organizing committee, and if they're involved in quality and understand and want to do something, that's enough to get started, okay? And 10 would be too many. And you decide what needs to be done, and the first thing you do is to create the support network. You go out and reach out to everybody. You'll find a host organization, preferably a chamber of commerce, because that's a good connection to where the money is, where the industry is. But you want to reach out to your community colleges and universities, if you can get them involved, to professional societies, and to the city government. And you find out who in these places has the potential for their career to be advanced by being involved with you. This is not part of the training of engineers, but people in the social sciences, particularly political science, understand this very well. And you spend a lot of time getting them into your orbit. You go to the mayor's office and you find out what are the political forces and who is there that's respected and non-political, and you invite that person and you explain that we need to have the city government involved in this because we're trying to create more jobs in the community and we want you to help persuade industry. And you go to the people in industry and we say, we want you involved because we want you to help us to persuade the city government to adopt quality management. It'll reduce our taxes. And everybody is invited in, not because they need the help, but we need them to help others. People are not so willing to come because we have pronounced them sick and in need of the medicine we have, but rather they're willing to come to help other people. And we find we get a good response to that. And then we recommend that you develop a strategy for training and plan a kickoff meeting, because it's important that you not only establish the activity for those who already know about quality, but some way to draw others in who don't know about quality yet. And the method that we use for that is to use a training package that has been developed by Carol and Dave Schwinn in Michigan. It's not the only package you can use, but we say there is one most important requirement. The training package should be built around actually solving problems from the place of work. I have to insert a comment, and please understand, I spent some 35 years of my life in academia, teaching in universities, several different universities. And in this connection, most universities are not at all helpful. Some of my best friends are academics, but I have to say that academics have proven not very useful, with a few exceptions, like Henry Neve here in the audience, because they like to teach general understanding of knowledge. And what people in industry need is know-how. They have problems they want to solve now. They are not interested in building up intellectual capital for the future. They're interested in making a difference here and now with the problems that bother them. And Gandhi used to say, the only form in which democracy dare appear before the peasant is as food. Right? And what we try to say, our advice is, the only form in which you should appear as a purveyor of quality is as a solution to problems people have here and now. They must see that connection before they spend their precious time and energy. So the training package is built around a very simple idea. Groups, say 5 people from company X, enroll, and they begin by selecting a problem at the place of work. And then, with the help of the instructor, they start to solve that problem. They do it in a structured way, and they are taught techniques as they go, but the techniques that are taught will come at different times depending on what they need to know, because you learn best when you feel a need to know. And when you are required to learn something because somebody else thinks you should know it, you don't learn it at all. You simply fulfill some formalism, or if you're an adult, you just turn off. You don't bother. I mean, you don't get grades, so what the hell? So we are very concerned that if you plan your training program, your teaching program, it be built around that. I was talking to someone this morning who explained to me, yes, we've got 4 community colleges or 4 universities, whatever it is, in our neighborhood, and they're all competing to design courses for us. And I said, you're heading for disaster. Don't let the academics design your courses. Don't. They can offer other things, and there'll be lots of interesting things for them to offer, but make sure that what you offer helps people to solve problems. Now, I'll just leap ahead a little bit to say that when we run people through these courses, generally we find that they are extraordinarily cost-effective. The charges seem to run around $2,500 or $3,000 to put 5 people through a course extending over a 7 or a 15-week period, depending whether they go every week or every alternate week. And usually they pick a problem, and usually the payback from that problem is enormous. In some cases, it's just outstanding. We had the example in Kingsport, Tennessee, where just as the people from Kingsport Foundry were about to choose their problem, they got a warning from their biggest customer that they were going to lose their contract to Taiwan, that they could get higher quality, lower cost. And so, of course, they chose as their project to deal with it. And they not only won back the contract, but they got a bigger contract. And I believe it's within the last year that the Kingsport Foundry, which was on the point of going bankrupt, bought the facilities of another foundry that did go bankrupt about 10 miles away because they were expanding. We had tremendous payback. You see, one of the things I've learned as a consultant, if I go into a company that is not using quality management, then there's money to be scooped up all over the place. All you have to do is just get busy to do it. And as a consultant, I'm working with the top management, and it's like pulling teeth to get something to happen. But through these courses, people start to do it. It's part of the training. No one realizes that we're actually going to make a difference in the company. Well, after you have planned the training, the strategy for training and the kickoff meeting, you then hold the kickoff meeting. And we have some very important lessons to give you about holding a kickoff meeting, because that determines how the community looks at you, what you're trying to do and what you're going to be. It has to be done in high style, and it has to have a character that makes people realize that this place it's for real. It's really going to do something. It's worth getting involved. And then you conduct your training and your workshops, and later you worry about institutionalizing this. And in our papers we have information on that. We try to find a local evangelist for quality, and there are people like that almost in every community. They work for a company which attempts to change its culture, and they've been to a seminar by Duran, or mostly by Dr. Deming or someone else. The number of people who can speak in a truly knowledgeable way about TQM has increased dramatically. The Malcolm Baldrige Prize has had an enormously positive effect here. In contrast with 5 years ago, we have many communities with people who want to do something, and these are the people that we work with first. A few warnings. Don't even try to start if there's no one in the community eager to do the work. You cannot come into the community and organize it, not without tremendous resources, and we don't have them. Beware the person who doesn't understand quality but wants to lead it, and to run into those people. In Erie, Pennsylvania, the man who was involved in this will now tell you about this story. He was with the Chamber of Commerce, still is, and when he heard Dr. Deming and he heard me discuss these communities, he says, "Oh, great. I will go to the state and I'll get one of these economic development grants, and we'll hire a man, and then we'll have a conference, and we'll get the head of economic development there, and we'll have somebody else from the governor's office and the mayor's office, and this and this, and Dr. Tribus, will you come and give the keynote address?" And I said, "Hell no. If you do that, I will have nothing to do with it." He says, "Why not?" Look, if you go to the state and get a grant, you know what you'll do? You'll operate that program so next year you can get another grant. I want you to build this program out of local support, and then you'll work hard to retain local support. And if you can't get local support, then either you don't know how to organize it or the community isn't ready. But I will have nothing to do with you if you go out and get a lot of money from somewhere else. You must build this so it serves the community, and the way you'll know if you serve it is if people come and participate with you. Well, he was very upset, but he did. And today, the program in Erie is very good. They've got over 200 people in the community involved in all kinds of committees, including committee of people to see how to apply quality management to run the churches, and another committee that's concerned with the schools, and another committee that's concerned with juvenile delinquency problems, and the police department, and so on. They've got, they're involved at all levels. And that is because it's truly a grassroots movement. So you want to be careful that you don't allow that. Another thing that can happen is, I'm thinking of a particular politician who has learned, but he went into his home district armed with the idea that this is great, and furthermore, it'll help me to get reelected. And anybody particularly in the House of Representatives, you realize as soon as you get to Washington, you got to start running for reelection again. And everything that a politician does begins with, how will this affect my chances to be reelected? And that warps the program. It also provides a target for the person who would like to run against him next time. So do not allow your project to become the property of, or to be identified with any politician. Keep them in the back. The purpose you adopt is critical to success. It should bear upon the problems and interests of the community. And therefore, you've got to understand what are the problems in your community and work towards those. As I say, the objectives should gain the hearts and minds of the employees. The objectives of a company should gain the hearts and minds of employees if it wishes to employ and retain competent and loyal people. And the same thing is true in a community quality council. The statement of purpose is of greater importance because people can decide whether or not to participate. So you have to have, first of all, something that people will feel is worth doing, and secondly, the way you do it has to be so evident to them that it's meaningful. Now that's where the flowcharting comes in, because with a flowchart, different people working on different committees can see how they're linked together. If you just have a list of flowcharts and an organization chart, it doesn't help. As you know, an organization chart doesn't really teach. It just shows how people distribute authority. Ishikawa has a wonderful statement about flowcharts and vertical authority. He said, every cloth has a warp and a woof, you know, the threads that go vertically and horizontally. Said, if your enterprise has strong vertical authority, but the processes that flow across the organization chart are not in control, you have the warp, but not the woof. Your company has no fabric. And so we need these flowcharts for people to see how the work's going to get done, and not just organization charts. So we use those, and people see which committee is a customer of another committee, and the organizing team, which plays the role of the management, then watches and sees that they serve one another. And then people feel that this whole thing is really working. The biggest barrier I have found as I go around the country is that people say to me, we're not ready to try to teach somebody else, we just want to have discussions of TQM. And all I can say to them is, well, if you're not interested in helping somebody else, then I'm not sure why I should be interested in helping you, and we leave them alone, and gradually they grow up and change. Now, we are concerned with training trainers, and we will go into a community, and as we use the people from outside the community to train that first group of people, we try to pick out from amongst them people who could become the trainers for the next time through. And we ask that they become trainers in their own companies and be willing to be trainers in the community. And then we work with them. And maybe the third time around, we only have to go back and just look at the final performance. There is a whole issue of quality control here, but with the videotapes and teaching materials, and an occasional input from someone on the outside, we're able to create truly autonomous groups. Now, there are some communities in which there are consultants who understand how to teach this way and who take it over, and we don't have to do that at all. We find ourselves quite in step with the teaching of Dr. Duran, who puts a very strong emphasis on projects. Teaching by projects, that's the secret. Now, when you introduce TQM into a community through the kickoff meeting, you have to make a special effort to make sure that you meet both the political and technical requirements. Responsible leaders need to be reassured that this is just not one more flaky scheme that's going to take their time. I once saw in the Ford Foundation a beautiful statement on the wall. It said, "A benefactor is someone who, watching you struggle for the distant shore and seeing that you are about to make it, steps in and offers to help." And you have to realize that the powerful people in the community, whom you ultimately want to have involved with you, are going to wait to see if it looks like you're going to be a success before they volunteer to be involved with you. Right? They didn't get where they are by joining lost causes. Okay? So you have to be very conscious of that, and therefore the way you introduce this program and the way you get it started is very important. And as I say, in Kingsport and in other communities, we've spent as much as 6 months planning all this. When somebody calls me and says, "We're planning the kickoff meeting and it's 3 months from now, will you get involved?" And I usually say no. But if you got 6 months lead time, then I know there's time for us to check that everything is done. So as you see in the top box, we have all the participants that are important get together and discuss dates, speakers, locations, theme, fees, logistics, publicity, and why we are doing this. And you check all the possible calendars, get hold of everybody you can to make sure that the date you've chosen makes good sense from all those points of view. Then you invite the mayor and the Chamber of Commerce to give brief speeches, and you offer to write them for them if you can get them to accept your help. You locate speakers and get agreement on specific topics. Have at least one local company with a success story to tell, one good evangelist from outside, some success stories from elsewhere. Then you decide the training plan, the dates, the size of the groups, the source of the trainers, the people to be trained. We help you with that, and there's another chart that tells more about that. And then sign up 3 or 4 companies before the meeting. Don't be afraid to take a lesson from the people who run carnivals. When they get up there to sell the tickets, there's already somebody in the crowd that's agreed to buy a ticket ahead of time. Make sure that people, in other words, no one in the room has to be the first to sign up. You already got somebody signed up. And don't forget, have the sign-up papers right there at the banquet and close by saying, let's see, you're such and such a company, how many people are you going to have, and so on. You've got to be very aggressive in getting these people involved. And in some cases, you'll have a company that says, well, we already have our own program. We say, okay, but put one team in the field to help us for the community. Later on, they'll come back and want your training materials, because I've seen very few companies that understand how to train through projects. By the way, you might borrow a PR person from one of your larger companies in the community and ask that person to join your team to help you arrange the PR, to make sure that the television and the newspapers and everybody is there. Now we have to come to the training process itself, and we have developed I forgot, this is the second part of the chart here, if you remember. See, the slide would be too crowded if I put it all on, but you can come down, you decide on the training plan and the groups and so forth, and then continuing, you sign up the companies in advance. Okay? Now, let's talk about how you maintain the quality of the training process. The Quality Council selects the trainers, and the trainers and the participating organizations meet to select the projects and teams. Not shown on the chart is another activity. When we sign up a team for a company, we ask that the CEO agree to come to 2 CEO breakfasts. These would be held 7:30 or whatever the habit is in your committee, 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and be over by 10. And we say, if you put a team in the field, you got to be there. And you get a group of CEOs together, and of course amongst them you got people who already know what it's all about and are in favor of it, and you got a lot of people who've never heard of it before, and they hear progress reports on what the teams are doing. And so they get indoctrinated, they learn something about it. And usually by the second time you're beginning to hear successes. And some guy who never heard of quality management, but we've managed somehow or other to get him involved, and he's come to the breakfast because he feels an obligation, the other guys are going there. And now he's hearing progress of his team, and we all say to him, hey, that's great, what else are you going to do in your company? And we try to use the CEOs to apply peer pressure. By the way, when you go to the Chamber of Commerce to get them involved, don't just walk into the Chamber of Commerce and ask to see the executive director and tell about what you're going to do. He's busy. He doesn't need another program. The members haven't asked for it. His budget is limited. His job, as he sees it, is to be polite to you and see you to the door. What you can do, for example, is to write to every member of the ASQC in your community and ask them to fill out a card listing for you the name of the highest level person in their company that they believe honestly, truly understands quality management. Take that short list of names, make it an advisory council, find out who on that is active in the Chamber of Commerce, and ask that person to go with you to the Chamber of Commerce to introduce the subject. Or if possible, to introduce it from within the chamber so you can come along later. So that executive director knows that what you're talking about is something important to his members. Don't go in there trying to sell a guy who has no interest in whose career in no way is dependent on your success. So those are just little things that we offer you out of our experience. Now, you conduct the first training sessions, as you see, and then you have a midterm review of projects and training. And here you try to understand what's going well and what isn't. And you start to get help for the final presentations, prepare for the final reporting conference. Then you complete the training, and then you hold a public celebration. And I tell you, it is one of the most moving experiences your community can have. In Kingsport, Tennessee, we had the janitors who cleaned the public toilets. They were sent in for training, and they had set for themselves the task of making sure that every public toilet in the city of Kingsport was as clean and smelled as nice as in the good hotels. And they studied the cleaning materials, how often to go back and replenish supplies, what to do about graffiti. They learned that if you get rid of the graffiti as fast as it appears, it doesn't appear so often because graffiti attracts graffiti. It was very moving, particularly when it became apparent that one of the people there in making the final presentation was a person who could not read. It's not often in a city that you have a lot of people listening to the janitors explain how they're improving things in the city. And I'll never forget, I was there, I think it was the mayor or the city manager, I can't remember which it is now, they asked him, how is it you found the money to pay for this training when you're always complaining about the fact there's no money in the budget? And he said, last year we saved enough money on toilet paper alone to pay for the training. We had in Erie, Pennsylvania, where the police department made their report. When we started, they said to us, you're going to work with the police department? Lots of luck. That was an outfit that was just considered beyond redemption. One of the things they discovered was that they wanted to improve the response time on the 911 calls, and they discovered that it was very bad, and they found two things wrong. The most important one was this, that if you were a patrolman and you fouled up enough, then for 2 weeks you answered the 911 calls, and that should give you some idea of why the service was so bad. And they corrected these things, and the difference was significant. So you hold a public celebration and you give lots of publicity to it, and you let the people themselves tell the story of what they did. And 9 times out of 10 it will be a moving experience, because these are people who, in the eyes of the power structure of the community, are not talented. See, labor is a commodity, management is a privilege. That's the hidden assumption of most managers. You know, when things go bad, you just let the labor go. You sell the used cars, sell whatever is used up, then buy new ones when you need them. And even though that isn't said in those terms, that's the way many people behave. And when they begin to see these people, the tellers in the bank who cut the waiting time for cashing checks from 6 minutes to 30 seconds, and so forth. Did these extremely interesting and useful things, and that obviously improve the quality of service, obviously improve the financial picture of the company. These things are exciting, and if you do the right job, you get a lot of people who want to sign up for the next round, and you're on the way to affecting the community. You end up finally with your plan to institutionalize the process. Let me just show that here. What that means is that you dip into the pool of people that you've trained and start getting them active on committees, and you go to the companies that have made a lot of money out of what you just did and use them to help you reach other people. Well, that's really the whole story. I think I have one more slide. If you want to find out more about us, you can write to Carol Schwinn, who's president of the Community Quality Coalition, at the address given, and we'll be very happy to work with you. We have a mailing list, we have a directory, we have a newsletter. We will help you with to find speakers, and we help you to network with one another. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Done. Yes, sir.
Have you ever worked with a large city, or what would be required to find a large city?
First, we have not yet worked with a large city, but we have been talking with people in San Francisco about organizing the community. We think it would have to be done by, there's two ways to cut it, and we don't know which way to do it. One is by simple communities. Another would be by communities of interest, and we have started that in the Los Angeles area. Ordinarily, we think of a community as geographically defined, but you could think of the aerospace community. And we have started a group, Kathy Hagler of the Technology Exchange Center and I have been working to start the aerospace community and to work with them as a community. And we think we will probably go that way in the San Francisco area. It's just too big to have that other purpose. Yes, sir.
Dr. Tribus, in a rural area, do you recommend starting with one chamber of commerce?
Oh, good question. In a rural area, do you start with one chamber of commerce? Well, this has political ramifications. In some communities, they are jealous of one another. But in Kingsport, we actually have what is called the Tri-Cities area. It's Kingsport, Union City, and Johnson City. The three work together as the Tri-Cities. So we think you should get up to critical mass, held back only by there are political ramifications, communities that are jealous of one another, and then you have to tread carefully. Yes, sir?
What do you do any work with existing organizations that only got started as they need some help?
Well, we find quite often that people have started up on their own or have something happening, and then we go to them or they come to us, and what I say to them is, well, here is the template. Now, this paper, if you're willing to try to move to that, then we'll help you. But if you're not, then tell us what you intend to do. If all you want is just to meet together, why then, lots of luck. We're glad to know about you, but there's not much leverage in coming to work with you. Yes?
In a community that's not at all familiar with, this total quality management, how do you make, you ran through it before, but I guess I'm still grasping for how do you introduce a totally new concept, especially in a rural community that's, kind of suspicious of outside influences to begin with. I mean, do you give them a book of
Yes.
Deming's Out of the Crisis, or how do you handle that?
The question was, how do we introduce this idea to a community in which it would be considered quite strange? And, if there is no one in the community that knows anything about quality management, then there's not much you can do. But presuming there are one or two people there who know about it because they have a printing company or whatever, then you work with them to identify who else ought to be involved. And yes, for example, I have about 16 different papers that are not copyrighted, and we distribute those fairly freely, and we tell people to copy them, and we give them reference works and so forth. And then we say, you may have as much as a year of preparation to locate people who resonate to those ideas. Now, for example, I'm thinking of a town near Erie, Meadville, where they most of the people didn't understand what it was all about. And so in introducing there, I spent a lot of time in a lecture about it and talked about what it could mean to the community, and urged them to take a chance to send some people to this course to learn. But we had the advantage of one company with a very aggressive CEO who was trying to move his company along, and he was a community leader, and he said, follow me. In other words, you can't come from out of town and sell these people something, but you can work with somebody who's already there, who is familiar to them and whom they respect, and then you offer them a very inexpensive way to get started. And once you get them into those courses and they start making successes, then you're home free. It's a lot of work, but you've passed that barrier. Yes, sir.
Comment that was made to us in our general discussion from the Tri-Cities experiment with the Association of Tennessee Eastmen in that area, very active in supporting it, but that also created some resistance in the community.
Yes.
People felt it was.
Yes, we were aware of that. When we went to, in Colorado, to, not Colorado Springs, but another town in Colorado, the folks at Eastman Kodak, who were the hosts, made it very clear they were backing out of the lead role to avoid that problem. Yes, sometimes when you have a place like Kingsport where you have one of the largest chemical plants in the world, a huge thing, and it dwarfs everything else, and there's the town at the edge of the plant. Clearly, it's a different situation. But that's why I emphasize being politically sensitive. You spend a lot of time talking to people in the power structure about what you're trying to do, what they care about, who's going to win, who's going to lose, and so forth, so that when you move forward, you don't leave out any important players, and you just don't step in the oompa, don't step in the where the problems are. And that's what careful preparation makes an enormous difference. Yes, sir.
You alluded to groups of people working on numerous different projects, including tellers at the bank working on sorting lines, but then you also alluded to people working on juvenile problems.
Yes.
And I'm getting the picture that once you start the training, if you have 5 people from one company that want to work on a project in their company, great, that'll benefit their company. Or if you have 5 people from 5 different companies that want to work on the community service center, great, that'll benefit the community. How do you distinguish what projects your community group is going to embrace?
Well, we don't do it quite the way you said. We will involve people, say, from the welfare department, and they will pick out something. It might be juvenile delinquency, and then they'll invite other people to participate, and pretty soon you've got something that involves the police department, parole department, and education, and so on. The rule generally is, in selecting a project, try to find something in which, if the people succeed, they personally are going to be heroes, okay? That the person who's paying for this is going to see tangible reward. Now, if at all possible, it ought to be something that everybody looks at and says, my God, that's wonderful. See? If you go into the police department, as happened in Madison, Wisconsin, and they decide they're going to improve the safety at an intersection, and they work with the community, and they get something going, and well, then at least the man who was mayor then feels proud, the police chief feels proud, the community feels proud, the officers feel proud. You really got something going for you, see? I might put it another way. You know, go into any enterprise, it doesn't matter whether it's a city or a hospital or a factory. Let's take a factory for a moment. You can do for yourself the analogy. And there are all these people there. And there's, in the factory, there's this young man who's just joined in some job, and he's in his 20s. And what's really on his mind? He wants to earn some money, he wants to buy a hi-fi set, he wants to do whatever it takes to chase girls. That's what's really, you know, that's why he's there. He doesn't have a strong commitment to this company. He's got a job, that's all. A secretary. She's just out of school, and she wants to get better clothes. She's got an apartment for the first time. She's living on her own. She wants to be attractive to people. You know, that's what she wants to do. There's this machinist. He's in his late 40s. He's got a son who's going to go to college pretty soon. He wants to make enough money to pay the mortgage, get the kid through school, have jobs security without being hassled. As an engineer, he would like to be working on interesting things because he's not sure he's going to work for this company forever. He wants to increase his technical proficiency. He likes his engineering. He wants to build something that will give him a sense of accomplishment, look good on the record. Everybody's got something they want to do. This is the CEO. He's watching this big stream of money coming in and another big stream almost as big going out, and the difference is how he gets measured, and he hopes that on his watch that the difference will remain positive. Everybody's got something that they want. Now, how does everybody work together? And the answer is you go to each person and say, I'm going to help you with quality of what you do, to help you get more satisfaction out of your work and to have a work situation that makes this company a better place because it's got a better future and your job is more secure and there's less hassle and it really works well. That's the unifying theme. See? So you have, the emphasis on quality is what draws people together, whether it's in a community or whether it's in the workplace. And now we try to make sure that the participants in these courses, in these instructions, get that opportunity for that satisfaction in what they do. And so we help them to choose a project that's meaningful to them. And we wouldn't take people from 5 different companies and put them together and say, we're going to improve the city. Because, one, they don't know. They don't know what's worth doing. We wouldn't know what's worth doing. And then they would be amateurs at it and they'd be meddling in somebody else's business. And somebody else would feel hurt. So we don't work that way. But I remember this woman in the welfare department who studied the giving out of welfare checks. And it's a new thing for him to look upon the people who received it as a customer and solve their problems. And they cut the time required to get the welfare checks to the recipients by a very large amount, and by the way, cut the cost of doing business in their office. So then they can feel good all around, see? I do believe, Ben, that they've run out of questions.
Well, in that case, we stand adjourned. There's the next one.